I'm counsel for the U.S. government, Ms. Pugialis.
The witness?
The court.
For the defense, Ms. Pollock. For the record, during this interview on June 2nd, 1994, will you characterize the atmosphere of the interview as informal?
During my interview of Mr. Goldstein, yes.
Were you armed with any firearms on that date?
Yes.
During your meeting with him?
Yes.
And was Officer Flores also armed with firearms?
Yes.
And this interview took place at Mr. Goldstein's home?
That's right.
And it was tape recorded?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't? Have you reviewed the report that you wrote on June 5th, 1994 regarding your meeting with Mr. Goldstein on June 2nd?
I haven't had the chance to review it. I have been here, so no, I didn't.
When did you last review it prior to the commencement of this trial?
I haven't had the chance at all to review it prior to the commencement of this trial.
Do you recall when you last looked at it?
I object. It's not relevant.
The objection is sustained.
Your Honor, this matter was gone into, the interview and then the subsequent meeting with Mr. Davis.
Go into the interview if that's what you want to do. Go ahead.
All right. Isn't it true, Agent, that in the course of that meeting with Mr. Goldstein on June 2nd, he never described Maria Reyes as a junior partner to Jose Ramos?
If you would give me a chance to review the report.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. I just quickly went over it. Your question again, please?
Isn't it true that in this interview, rather in this report, you wrote up June 5th, 1994, there is no reference to the fact that Maria Reyes is a junior partner to Jose Ramos?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled.
That's correct.
You were present again on March 16th in a meeting with Mr. Davis and Barry Goldstein, were you not?
Yes, I was.
And that was in preparation for his testimony here in court, was it not?
I'm sorry. What date again?
March 16th, 1994.
Yes.
A little over a month ago.
This is 1995.
I'm sorry, March 16th, 1995. That was the meeting, so a little over a month ago, correct?
Yes.
And was that, the purpose of that meeting was to prepare him for testimony here in court, was it not?
Yes.
The purpose was to find out more information that Mr. Goldstein could provide in court, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was to find out more. It was specific questions. He was asked specific questions.
You went into more detail, did you not, with him?
I object. The question is vague. More detailed than what?
Rephrase it.
Your questions were more detailed, were they not, on March 16th, 1995 than they had been on the prior interview in June of 1994?
I object again as vague.
Overruled.
Yes, somewhat.
Because you wanted to get more information, didn't you?
Probably, and clarify things, yes.
And you described it as not a complete debriefing, correct?
That's correct.
It was a meeting to find out more information about what Ana or Maria Reyes' role was in relation to Julio Ramos, wasn't it?
Yes, what he felt Ana's role was.
Officer, at the time of this meeting, March 16th, were you the only law enforcement officer present with Mr. Davis and Mr. Goldstein?
Yes.
As the case agent in this case, you have been present at every court appearance in this case, have you not?
No.
Would you estimate you have been in at least 90% of them?
Possibly.
As high as 95%?
No.
Isn't it true that for each court appearance that you appeared at in this case, since the arrest in June 1993, you were aware of the status of the case after each court appearance, were you not?
Somewhat, yes.
When you sat in court, you heard what the next date of the appearance was, right?
Object to the relevance of this.
I'm getting there, Your Honor. These are preliminary.
So why don't you get there?
You were in court in a hearing prior to March 16th, 1995, which dealt with the fact that Ms. Maria Reyes was going to be proceeding to trial alone, were you not?
Yes, I believe so.
And you were aware that the defense that she was going to raise was that she was a victim of domestic abuse by Julio Ramos, were you not?
I think so, yes.
And you were aware of that before you started this interview with Barry Goldstein, right?
I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure I understand.
You knew these facts about the fact that Maria was proceeding to trial first, alone, and raising a defense of domestic violence prior to meeting with Mr. Goldstein, correct?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that many of the questions that you asked specifically on March 16th were tailored to whether or not she, in Mr. Goldstein's opinion, was a victim of domestic violence?
Yes.
Did you tell Mr. Goldstein at the meeting on March 16th that Maria Reyes was going to trial alone?
I believe so, yes.
And did you tell Mr. Goldstein that she would be proceeding to trial first before anyone else in this case?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear.
Did you tell Mr. Goldstein that Maria Reyes would be proceeding to trial alone first before anyone else in this case?
I may have. I'm not sure if I did.
And you told him, did you give him any further information as to what the basis of her defense was, other than that she was claiming that she was a battered wife?
I never told him that she was going to claim the battered wife defense.
Did you tell, as you sit here today, isn't it true that you were aware that she was raising a defense of domestic violence?
Object, that's not relevant.
He testified.
It's asked and answered. Go ahead.
Did you at any time during the meeting with Mr. Goldstein on March 16th tell him that Maria Reyes was going to raise the defense that she was the victim of spousal abuse?
That's been asked and answered.
Go ahead. Did you?
No.
Go ahead.
Did Mr. Davis ever present that to Mr. Goldstein?
Is that when this witness is present?
Go ahead.
This witness was present.
Go ahead.
No.
Now you generated a report from the meeting on March 16th, correct?
Yes.
And that report was dated March 23rd, was it not?
Yes.
So you generated a total, or have written 2 reports in this case regarding information that Mr. Goldstein has provided to you, is that correct?
That I can remember, yes.
Isn't it true that in the report dated June 5th, 1994, there was no mention about how many kilograms of heroin Barry Goldstein had ever purchased from Julio Ramos and those associated with him?
When I wrote those reports, those are summaries of what I took down in my notes. I don't recall if he brought that up at that time or not.
Sir, this is the report that I'm referring to that you just reviewed. Isn't it true that there is absolutely no reference during that meeting on March 5th, 1994, to the effect that Barry Goldstein bought 10 kilograms, approximately 10 kilograms of heroin from Julio Ramos and those affiliated with him?
Your Honor, I think counsel is getting dates mixed up. There is no March 5th, 1994.
I'm sorry, I meant June 5th.
Could I have the question?
Isn't it true there is no mention in the report of June 5th, 1994, that Barry Goldstein ever told you that he purchased approximately 10 kilograms of heroin from Julio Ramos and those associated with him?
Object to that. It calls for hearsay as to the contents of the report.
The objection will be overruled. What you're asking is whether or not there was any statement made in that report or any statement made at that time?
Yes.
Okay, so the question was what was said at that time. Go ahead, you can phrase it differently.
Did you ever question Barry Goldstein on June 5th, 1994 regarding the total amount of heroin that he estimated he had purchased from Julio Ramos and those associated with him?
I don't recall if I did.
And on March 16th, 1995, when you met with Barry Goldstein for preparation of trial in this case, did you ever talk to him and ask him to give an estimate on how much heroin he had purchased from Julio Ramos and those affiliated with him?
I do recall him. He was asked that, and he gave a number, but I don't know if I had put it inside my report.
Do you need to look at your report to refresh your memory? Do you have it in front of you, sir?
I have that one, yes.
Referring to the report that you wrote dated March 23rd, 1995, could you look at it and please answer whether or not there is any reference to the fact that he purchased approximately 10 kilograms of heroin from Julio Ramos and those affiliated with him?
Calls for hearsay.
There has been testimony. The question is whether you wrote down what he said.
No, I did not.
Okay.
And, officer, is it fair to say that 10 kilograms of heroin would be very significant to you as a law enforcement officer?
It is a significant number, yes.
And that would be an amount that you would write down because it is important, is it not?
Not necessarily. The number he gave us was his estimation of how much he had purchased over the period of time that he had dealt with the Ramos organization. I did not write that down when he told me that.
And the 10 kilograms that we're talking about is the amount that he testified here to under oath regarding the total amount that he purchased for the entire period of time he was dealing with Julio Ramos, correct?
I believe he said that was his estimation.
Correct. Approximately 10 kilograms, correct?
That's correct.
And that's a significant amount of heroin to you, isn't it?
Yes.
Yet there is no reference to it in the report that you wrote in June of this year, March of this year. I'm so sorry.
Objection, argumentative.
The objection is sustained.
Isn't it true that there is no mention of that amount of heroin in any reports regarding meetings with Barry Goldstein?
I'm sorry?
Isn't it true that there is no mention of 10 kilograms of heroin purchased by Barry Goldstein in any reports of meetings with him by law enforcement agents?
I'm not sure. I did not. In the reports I wrote, I did not put that in there.
Officer, agent of the several other informants that were used in the court of this case, On occasion, some of them had body wires on them. Isn't that true?
No.
Were body wires ever used on any informants in this case?
I believe the undercover agents wore the body wires.
No informants ever had a wire on them so that what they were saying was recorded?
To the best of my recollection, no.
And no body wire was ever placed on Mr. Goldstein?
I don't recall if there was or not.
Was Barry Goldstein ever directly responsible to you?
No.
Let's take a recess now.
And now it's quiet.
Yeah, right.
That was perfect when she was questioning you guys, and you said, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
I
it.
didn't hear